Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. My name is Angelina, and I spent 18 months believing there was something fundamentally wrong with me because a man chose to ignore me. It was a gray Tuesday morning in Boston when I finally hit rock bottom. I was sitting in my car outside my office building, staring at my phone, waiting for a text that would never come. For the third day in a row, Marcus had read my messages and simply ... said nothing. 3 months earlier, we had been inseparable. Marcus, a successful architect with an easy smile and thoughtful way of speaking, had pursued me with an intensity that felt like being swept away by a warm current. He called every day, planned creative dates, told me I was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Then, slowly, everything changed. First, the calls became less frequent. Then, his responses to my texts grew shorter. Finally, I found myself in this parking lot, checking my phone obsessively, wondering what I had done wrong, what I could do differently, how I could win back his attention. The worst part wasn't the silence itself, it was what it did to my mind. I replayed every conversation, analyzed every interaction, searched for the moment I had somehow failed. I posted photos on social media hoping he'd notice. I texted casual questions that didn't require responses, just to feel some connection. I became a version of myself I didn't recognize, desperate, anxious, and completely focused on someone who seemed to barely acknowledge my existence. That morning in my car, as I watched my breath fog the windows, while waiting for a message that wouldn't come, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done trying to solve the mystery of Marcus's indifference. Instead, I was going to understand the psychology behind it. I had no idea that this decision would lead me to discover truths about male behavior that would transform not just my relationship with Marcus, but my understanding of myself. Chapter 2. Finding the Answer. That evening, I called my college friend Sarah, who was completing her PhD in psychology at the University of Toronto. Through tears of frustration, I told her about Marcus's behavior and my complete confusion about what was happening. "Angelina," Sarah said gently, "have you ever heard of Carl Jung's theory of projection?" I hadn't. "There's someone you need to talk to," she continued. Dr. Walker Teddy, a psychologist in Austin who specializes in relationship dynamics and Jung's theories. He's helped hundreds of women understand exactly what you're going through. His research shows that when men ignore women, it often has nothing to do with the woman and everything to do with the man's own psychological fears. Within a week, I found myself on a video call with Dr. Teddy, a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes and a calming presence that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me about this man who's been ignoring you," he said simply. As I described Marcus and our relationship, Dr. Teddy listened without judgment. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Angelina, what if I told you that his ignoring you reveals more about his weaknesses than about any supposed flaw in you?" Chapter 3. Understanding the Shadow. Dr. Teddy introduced me to Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, the parts of our personality we don't want to admit exist. A man who ignores a woman he was once interested in, Dr. Teddy explained, is often projecting his own insecurities, his fear of attachment, or even a sense of inferiority he cannot face. Jung said that what we project onto others is often just a reflection of what we fear within ourselves. He shared a case study from his work in Vancouver with a woman named Lisa whose boyfriend had suddenly become distant and cold after 3 months of intense connection. Lisa spent weeks wondering what she had done wrong, Dr. Teddy explained. But when we explored the man's behavior through Jung's lens, we discovered he was terrified of the vulnerability he felt with her. His strength in pulling away was actually his greatest weakness, his inability to handle genuine emotional connection. This was a revelation. I had been so focused on my own supposed failures that I had never considered that Marcus's behavior might be about his own fears. Jung taught us that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Dr. Teddy continued. Marcus isn't in control of his behavior, he's become a prisoner of his own psychological shadows. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe there was something much deeper happening that had nothing to do with my worth as a person. Chapter 4. The 5 Weaknesses. Over the next several sessions, Dr. Teddy taught me what he called the 5 psychological weaknesses of men, who ignore women patterns he had identified through years of research with over 300 women across the United States, Canada, and Australia. Weakness number 1, the illusion of control. Men like Marcus ignore women because they believe you'll always be there, Dr. Teddy explained. They operate from a place of assumed security that no matter how they behave, you'll still be available when they want your attention. He shared research from Stanford University showing that people who feel they have guaranteed access to something value it less than those who must work to maintain it. The moment that certainty disappears, Dr. Teddy said, his entire psychological framework begins to crumble. Weakness number 2, the need for security. The second weakness is his dependence on your insecurity, Dr. Teddy continued. Men who feed off female anxiety do so because it gives them a false sense of power. If he senses that you believe you can't live without him, he feels comfortable ignoring you. He referenced studies from the University of Melbourne, showing that people with secure attachment styles are more attractive to others because they don't emanate neediness or desperation. Weakness number 3, the illusion of exclusivity. Marcus pulls away with the arrogance of someone who believes he's the center of your universe, Dr. Teddy explained. This illusion of being irreplaceable is actually his greatest vulnerability. Weakness number 4, the need to feel essential. Many men convince themselves that women need them emotionally or practically, Dr. Teddy said. When you show them that your life doesn't depend on their presence, their entire sense of importance begins to collapse. Weakness number 5, the fragile ego. A man's self-esteem often depends on external validation. Dr. Teddy concluded, when that validation is withdrawn, the foundation of his confidence disappears. I was beginning to see Marcus's behavior in an entirely new light. His silence wasn't strength, it was a symptom of deep psychological insecurity. Chapter 5, the practical application. Dr. Teddy didn't just give me theory, he gave me a practical plan based on Jung's principles and modern psychological research. The goal isn't to manipulate Marcus, he explained. It's to heal your own relationship with yourself and stop participating in dynamics that don't serve you. Step 1. Withdraw your energy. For the next 2 weeks, Dr. Teddy instructed, you're going to completely stop initiating contact with Marcus. No texts, no calls, no social media interactions. This isn't about playing games, it's about breaking the pattern that's been feeding his illusion of control. This was terrifying. My first instinct was to worry that if I stopped reaching out, Marcus would disappear completely. But Dr. Teddy helped me reframe this fear. If he disappears because you're no longer chasing him, he said gently, then he was never really there in the first place. You'll be saving yourself from investing in someone who is only interested in your pursuit, not your presence. Step 2. Rebuild your social world. Marcus feels irreplaceable because you've made him the center of your universe. Dr. Teddy observed, it's time to expand your world again. He had me list all the relationships and activities I had neglected while focusing on Marcus. The list was embarrassingly long. Close friends I hadn't seen in months, hobbies I'd abandoned, family members I'd barely spoken to. Your homework is to reconnect with 3 of these relationships this week, Dr. Teddy said, not to make Marcus jealous, but to remember who you are beyond this relationship. Step 3. Develop emotional independence. The most attractive thing about a person is their ability to be complete on their own, Dr. Teddy explained. When you stop needing Marcus's validation to feel good about yourself, you become irresistible not just to him, but to everyone. He introduced me to practices for building self-validation, daily journaling about my accomplishments, setting and achieving personal goals, practicing self-compassion when I felt insecure. Chapter 6. The implementation. Putting Dr. Teddy's plan into action was harder than I expected. The first week of not contacting Marcus felt like torture. Every fiber of my being wanted to reach out, to explain, to fix whatever was wrong. But I stuck to the plan. Instead of texting Marcus, I called my friend Jenny, whom I hadn't spoken to in 3 months. Instead of checking if he'd viewed my social media stories, I signed up for a photography class I'd been wanting to take for years. Slowly, something began to shift. I started remembering what it felt like to have a full life that didn't revolve around one person's approval. I reconnected with my love of hiking, spending Saturday mornings on trails outside Boston instead of lying in bed wondering why Marcus hadn't called. The photography class was particularly transformative. Being in a room full of people who shared my interest, learning something new just for the joy of it, reminded me that I was interesting and capable independent of any romantic relationship. By the end of the second week, I realized I hadn't checked Marcus's social media in 3 days. Not because I was forcing myself not to, but because I had genuinely been too busy living my own life to think about it. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Response. 2.5 weeks into my communication silence, something unexpected happened. Marcus texted me, "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing?" My old self would have responded immediately with enthusiasm and relief, but Dr. Teddy had prepared me for this moment. When he reaches out, Dr. Teddy had said, it will be because he's feeling the first weakness is loss of control. How you respond will determine whether you fall back into the old pattern or establish a new dynamic. I waited for hours before responding with a simple, "I'm doing well, thanks. Hope you are too." No explanation for my absence, no eager questions about his life, no attempt to restart our old dynamic, just polite acknowledgement. Marcus responded almost immediately, "We should catch up soon. Want to grab dinner this week?" Again, I waited. Then I responded, "I'm pretty busy this week, but maybe we can figure something out next week." For the first time in our entire relationship, I wasn't immediately available. I wasn't dropping everything for his attention. And his response confirmed everything Dr. Teddy had taught me. Marcus started texting more frequently. He began asking questions about what I was doing, who I was with, why I seemed different. The man who had been content to ignore me was suddenly very interested in my attention. Chapter 8. The Setback. 3 weeks into my new approach, I had what Dr. Teddy warned me would happen, a setback. Marcus and I had dinner at a restaurant we used to frequent. He was charming, attentive, and apologetic about his recent distance. He blamed work stress and family issues, making it seem like his ignoring me had been about external circumstances, rather than his own choices. I felt myself slipping back into old patterns. His attention felt like water in a desert, and I found myself hanging on his every word, laughing too enthusiastically at his jokes, agreeing with opinions I didn't actually share. When he suggested coming back to my apartment, I said yes, even though something in my gut told me it was too soon. The next morning, Marcus was distant again. He left early, citing meetings he had to prepare for. Over the next few days, his texting became sporadic again, his responses shorter and less engaged. I was devastated. I felt like I had undone all my progress, fallen back into the same pattern that had made me feel so powerless before. When I told Dr. Teddy about the setback during our next session, he wasn't surprised. "Angelina, this is part of the process," he said kindly. "You're learning to break patterns that have been years in the making. One dinner doesn't erase your growth, but it can teach you something important about maintaining your boundaries." Chapter 9. Understanding the Pattern. Dr. Teddy helped me see that Marcus's behavior was following a predictable psychological pattern. When you withdrew your attention, Marcus felt the first weakness, loss of control, he explained, so he reached out to re-establish his sense of power. When you responded to his dinner invitation with the same energy you used to give him, you inadvertently confirmed that the old dynamic was still available. He shared a case study from his work in Sydney with a woman named Claire, who had experienced an almost identical situation. Claire's partner would pull away until she stopped chasing, then return with renewed attention until she was hooked again, then repeat the cycle, Dr. Teddy explained. It wasn't conscious manipulation, it was an unconscious pattern driven by his need to feel in control of the relationship. The key, Dr. Teddy continued, is understanding that his return doesn't mean he's changed. It means he's responding to your change. If you want genuine transformation, you have to maintain your new boundaries consistently. This was hard to hear, but it made perfect sense. I had been treating Marcus's renewed attention as evidence that my worth had been restored, rather than understanding it as confirmation that my new approach was working. Chapter 10. The Real Transformation. Armed with this understanding, I approached my next interaction with Marcus completely differently. When he texted asking to see me again, I responded, "I enjoyed our dinner. but I'm looking for someone who's consistently interested, not just when it's convenient for them." His response was immediate and defensive. "I've been busy with work. I thought you understood that." Old Angelina would have apologized and made excuses for him. New Angelina responded, "I understand you're busy. I'm busy too. I'm just not interested in relationships that require me to guess whether someone wants to be with me." This led to our first honest conversation in months. Marcus admitted that he had been pulling away because he felt overwhelmed by how much he cared about me. He confessed that ignoring me had been easier than dealing with his fear of getting hurt. For the first time, I saw Marcus's behavior for what it really was, not strength or disinterest, but fear and emotional immaturity. But instead of rushing to comfort him or fix his fears, I held my boundary. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, "but I need to be with someone who handles their fears by communicating, not by disappearing. If you want to work on that, I'm open to seeing where this goes, but I won't go back to the old pattern." Chapter 11. The Choice. Marcus had to make a choice: commit to genuine change or lose me entirely. For a week, I didn't hear from him. During that time, instead of anxiously waiting, I continued building my own life. I had coffee with friends, took photos for my class, even went on a casual date with someone I met at a networking event. When Marcus finally called, his energy was completely different. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "You're right. I have been running away instead of dealing with my feelings. I started seeing a therapist this week." This was the moment Dr. Teddy had prepared me for, when the man who had been ignoring me was finally ready to do the work to be worthy of my attention. But something had shifted in me during those months of growth. While I was glad Marcus was taking responsibility for his behavior, I was no longer desperate for his validation. I had rediscovered my own worth, rebuilt my social world, and learned what it felt like to be emotionally independent. "That's great, Marcus," I said genuinely. "I hope therapy helps you understand yourself better. Does this mean we can try again?" he asked. I paused, thinking about the woman I had become, someone who no longer needed to be chosen to feel valuable, who had learned to choose herself first. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not going to wait around while you figure yourself out. If you want to be with me, you'll need to show me through your actions, not just your words." Chapter 12. The New Dynamic. Over the following months, Marcus and I slowly rebuilt our relationship at this time. From a completely different foundation. Instead of being desperate for his attention, I remained committed to my own life and interests. Instead of being available whenever he called, I maintained my own schedule and priorities. Instead of accepting less than I deserved, I held firm boundaries about how I wanted to be treated. And remarkably, this made our relationship stronger, not weaker. Marcus later told me that my transformation had been both terrifying and incredibly attractive. He said that losing his ability to take me for granted had forced him to genuinely appreciate what he had with me. "When you stopped chasing me," he admitted, "I realized I had been taking you for granted. I had gotten comfortable knowing you'd always be there no matter how I behaved. When that security disappeared, I had to confront how much I actually cared about you. But the most important transformation wasn't in Marcus, it was in me. I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by whether someone chose to ignore me or pursue me. I had discovered that the most attractive thing I could be was myself, fully and unapologetically." Chapter 13. Helping Others. A year after my transformation began, Dr. Teddy invited me to speak at a workshop for women struggling with similar relationship dynamics. "Angelina's story," he told the group, "illustrates the power of understanding that someone else's behavior toward you is rarely about you and almost always about their own psychological landscape." I shared my journey with 20 women from across North America, teachers, lawyers, artists, students, all of whom had been questioning their worth because of men who had chosen to ignore them. "The most important thing I learned," I told them, "is that when someone ignores you, you have a choice. You can chase them and lose yourself in the process, or you can use their indifference as an opportunity to rediscover your own value." One woman, Sarah from Vancouver, raised her hand. "But what if he never comes back? What if standing up for yourself means losing him? Then you've saved yourself from investing in someone who was never really invested in you," I replied. "I know that's scary, but I promise you the right person will never make you question your worth." After the workshop, several women approached me with their own stories. Each one was unique, but the pattern was always the same. They had been giving their power away to men who hadn't earned it, then blaming themselves when those men didn't treat them well. Chapter 14. The Ripple Effect. My transformation had effects that extended far beyond my relationship with Marcus. Learning to value myself changed how I showed up in every area of my life. At work, I stopped accepting projects that were beneath my skill level and started advocating for promotions I deserved. In friendships, I stopped being the one who always gave more than I received. With my family, I established healthier boundaries and communicated my needs more clearly. Most importantly, I became a model for other women in my life. My sister, who had been in an on and on-off relationship with a man who only called her when he was lonely, watched my transformation and began implementing similar boundaries. My friend Lisa started attending therapy to work on her own patterns of seeking validation from unavailable men. The ripple effects of learning to value yourself, I discovered, touch every relationship you have. Chapter 15. The Deeper Understanding. Through continued sessions with Dr. Teddy and my own reading of Jung's work, I came to understand that my experience with Marcus was part of a much larger psychological phenomenon. Jung taught us that we often attract relationships that mirror our own unconscious beliefs about ourselves. Dr. Teddy explained, "You attracted a man who ignored you because, on some level, you had been ignoring your own needs and worth for years." This was a profound realization. Before Marcus, I had always been the accommodating one in relationships, the one who adapted to what others wanted, the one who was grateful for whatever attention I received. Your relationship with Marcus, Dr. Teddy continued, was your psyche's way of forcing you to confront these patterns. His ignoring you was unbearable because it reflected how you had been treating yourself. Understanding this helped me see that Marcus hadn't been the villain in my story. He had been my teacher, showing me exactly what I needed to learn about loving myself. Chapter 16. The Integration. 2 years after my transformation began, I had integrated everything I learned into a completely new way of being in relationships. I no longer feared being ignored because I knew my worth wasn't dependent on other people's attention. I no longer chased unavailable partners because I had learned to value my own availability. I no longer accepted less than I deserved because I had developed an unshakable understanding of what I deserved. Marcus and I continued dating, but our relationship looked nothing like it had before. We were both whole people choosing to share our lives, rather than incomplete people seeking completion through each other. "You're completely different," Marcus told me one evening as we walked through Boston Common. "Not just with me, but with everyone. You carry yourself like you know you're valuable." "I do know I'm valuable," I replied. "That's the difference." But the real test of my transformation came when Marcus got a job offer in San Francisco and had to make a decision about whether to take it. Old Angelina would have panicked, would have tried to convince him to stay, would have offered to move with him even if it wasn't what I wanted. New Angelina supported his decision-making process without trying to control the outcome. I told him I would miss him if he left, but that I wanted him to make the choice that was best for his career. I made it clear that I wouldn't be waiting indefinitely, but that I also wouldn't try to manipulate his decision. In the end, Marcus chose to stay in Boston, not because I pressured him, but because he realized he didn't want to lose what we had built together. Conclusion: the woman who knows her worth. Today, as I write this story, I reflect on the journey from the woman who sat in her car, waiting for a text, to the woman who never again has to beg for attention. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about men or relationships, it was about the power of knowing your own worth. When you truly understand your value, you stop accepting behavior that doesn't honor it. When you stop accepting poor treatment, you either inspire others to treat you better, or you attract people who already know how to treat you well. Carl Jung was right. What we don't face within ourselves, we end up projecting outward. I had been attracting men who ignored me because I had been ignoring my own needs for years. When I learned to pay attention to myself, everything changed. To women reading this who are struggling with men who ignore them, your worth is not determined by whether someone chooses to see it. Your value doesn't decrease because someone fails to recognize it. And your happiness doesn't depend on receiving attention from people who don't know how to give it consistently. The man who ignores you is showing you his weaknesses, not revealing yours. He's demonstrating his inability to handle genuine connection, his fear of vulnerability, his dependence on control games to feel powerful. But more importantly, he's giving you an opportunity, the chance to discover your own strength, to rebuild your relationship with yourself, to learn that the most important person who needs to value you is you. When you understand this truth deeply, you'll never again waste energy chasing someone who's too emotionally immature to appreciate what's right in front of them. You'll become the woman who doesn't need to be chosen because she has learned to choose herself. And that woman, confident, independent, secure in her own worth, is irresistible not because she's trying to be, but because she's living authentically from her own power. The silence that once felt like rejection becomes the space where you rediscover your voice. The indifference that once felt like abandonment becomes the freedom to choose better. And the man who once made you question your worth becomes the catalyst for you finally understanding it. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly what you will no longer accept. Marcus gave me that gift, and for that, I am genuinely grateful.